Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shvati Bhakti Vedanta Swananiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, yes, let us begin with questions from Instagram, first of all. And here's a bit of a question. What is the simplicity of the Krishna consciousness method if the achievement of the attentive level of chanting of the holy names is a very long and difficult process? Well, that's an interesting question. I understand where you're coming from. And you know what I'd say is it's not exactly that it's a long and difficult, whatever it was you said, process. What did you say? A very long and difficult process. It's not exactly like that. It depends on you. Maharaj Katvanga became Krishna conscious fully in a matter of 1 minute. Normally it takes some time, some years, to become perfect. But to get a taste for, to start developing some attentiveness, if a person is really sincere and serious and they want to do it, it only needs to take some days or just a few weeks. Just shake off the old habits a little bit. I have a little excerpt from a conversation, it's a morning walk actually, of Srila Prabhupada, in which he addresses this point of why should it be so difficult to control the mind? This is what we're talking about, focusing the mind, controlling the mind. I'm going to play it right now. I hope you're going to be able to hear it. I'll go close so the microphones are close.
It's very difficult to control my mind when I chant. It's very difficult to control my mind when I chant it. One does.
What is the controlling of mind? You have to chant and hear, that's all. You have to chant with your tongue and the sound you hear, that's what is the question of mind.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Mahaprabhu Kripa Prabhu? Again, I should say. Yeah, the devotee says to Prabhupada that it's very difficult to control the mind when I chant. And Prabhupada says, what? Let me just play it again.
It's very difficult to control my mind when I chant it. One does.
What is the controlling of mind? You have to chant and hear, that's all. You have to chant with your tongue and the sound you hear, that's what is the question of mind.
So what is the question of mind? You have to chant and hear, that's all. What's the question of mind? Anyway, of course it may take a little practice, but with a little practice and with sincere endeavor, it's not so difficult. And when you do it, when you break through, oh, it is just so wonderful. And of course, with something very valuable, you don't expect it to be just like too easy. It's very simple, but Krishna's watching and he wants devotees to become sincere. Then he gives mercy and everything becomes easier. How is a Grihasta devotee to support his family and not dive into the struggle for existence? Yeah, okay, good question. You know, the one thing is, you should try to get a decent job. Not all jobs are equal. Try to get a job so your working time is regulated, means during the day, not at night, as much as possible, should be possible. And you don't have to work on weekends. You don't have to work at night. Try to get some job like that. It's not impossible. And then you'll have time for cultivating your Krishna consciousness. And when you go to work and you have to associate with the people there, you'll be spiritually stronger. And you won't be affected by whatever negativity or lack of Krishna consciousness is displayed by the other people at work. Yeah, so like that. In fact, we have a little slogan, you could say, that in regards to working, try to work as little as possible and try to get as much money as possible. That's a good program. But if while you're working, if you can keep to yourself and not have to get caught up with the other work people, have your own little space where you can have some Krishna consciousness and really be fixed in the idea, why am I working? What am I doing? I am working to get money to support my family in Krishna consciousness. So like that, it's service. It's all for supporting Krishna consciousness. Is there a contradiction between the 9th offense to preach to atheists about the glories of the holy name of the Lord and the fact that devotees distribute Prabhupada's books in the street? It's not exactly to preach to atheists, although it includes them, but it's to preach to people who are faithless. So it's a good question, so definitely an important question. We mentioned the other day, hopefully you wrote it down, that the middle-level devotee, the Madhyam Adhikari, sees 4 types of people and relates with them in 4 different ways. First, he sees Krishna, and he loves and serves Krishna. Second, he sees the devotees, and he befriends the devotees, and lives with them, and works with them. Then he sees the innocent people who are not devotees. They're caught up in material life, but they don't have big prejudices against God, against Hare Krishna even. They're kind of open-minded, although they're basically more or less in ignorance, particularly about real God consciousness. So the devotees distribute Prabhupada's books to them because they're not in that category of, being prejudiced and having a serious attitude problem towards Krishna consciousness. So it doesn't fall into the category of the 9th offense, which is faithless in that context means people are like more or less antagonistic. Plus, on top of that, it is Lord Chaitanya's movement. These 10 offenses, they come from the Padma Purana. It's very ancient. And now Lord Chaitanya has come, and he is more broad-minded in his preaching of Krishna consciousness than people were in the time of Padma Purana, means 5,000 years ago. Lord Chaitanya is more liberal. So therefore, even though, of course, we don't really know when we approach a person on the street, we don't really know, is he a nice person or not a nice one, or envious or an atheist? We don't really know. But, so we approach. And if they turn out to be nasty, offensive, we just go. But so many of them are fairly open. So many are fairly open. So there's a little element of risk that unavoidably we will meet some nonsense people sometimes. It will happen. But when we do that, we don't get involved with them and argue with them and fight with them. We just go. As soon as we understand, here we have a first-class demon, or maybe not even that bad, but just someone who just doesn't want to know. Then we go and find someone else. Sometimes while chanting japa, some thoughts come to my mind. For what am I doing it? Maybe I should return to my previous usual life and live as usual people live. But something holds me, and I go on chanting mechanically out of a sense of duty. Please advise me what to do in such a situation. Yes, well, we mentioned a couple of days ago or something, that attentive, like being absorbed in chanting with taste, is better than mechanical chanting. Obviously, it's much better. But mechanical chanting is better than no chanting. That's also a fact. But if you're just caught up in mechanical chanting and you can't really, so far you haven't really got a taste, or maybe you lost the taste, then what I'd suggest you do, well, the thing is, if thoughts like this are coming to your mind, maybe I should just give it up and go back to being a non-devotee. That means that not only is your chanting mechanical, but your chanting is also offensive. It's offensive. You're committing offenses. As a result, your mind is starting to concoct ideas of its own. Yeah, and trying to sway you away from Krishna consciousness. So what I'd suggest to do, there's a couple of things. One, go on a japa retreat. Seriously, go on a japa retreat. Two, if you can't do that, or if you can, then do this also. But as often as reasonably possible, chant with devotees who really have taste and who really, they become absorbed in the chanting, because association is very powerful. So this is what I'd say to do. Otherwise, get up early in the morning. Often I tell people, if you want to help yourself in Krishna consciousness, get up early in the morning and take a bath and chant. And then I tell people, if you want to go backwards out of Krishna consciousness in reverse, then don't get up early in the morning. Get up late. And don't take a bath and then chant. If you want to go backwards. And if you do like that, you'll be successful. You'll go backwards. So why such an emphasis on the fourth principle? What's the fourth principle? It depends, how they're recited. There's no official fourth principle, actually. But generally what they refer to as the fourth principle, at least in Russia, is no illicit sex. So why such an emphasis? Well, I don't know if there's such an emphasis as such, but still it's important to avoid illicit sex life because sex life means we're talking about some things to do with love and intimate relationship with someone who is loved by you, beloved. But actually, Krishna consciousness means we are meant to revive our eternal love for Krishna. So if a devotee becomes too attached to illicit sex life, how are they going to really develop an attraction for developing a loving relationship with Krishna? They'll just be caught up in this sexual relationship. So that's the point there. Okay. Chanting the holy names on the stage of Namaparad, the clearing stage, we can achieve liberation. We read that yesterday. But sometimes I hear in lectures that devotees can go to paradise, or means actually the heavenly planets. Well, that's also possible. That's also possible. It depends on the motive, which you suggest. It does. But it also depends on how carefully you chant. If you chant very carefully, as Prabhupada was instructing us, as we read the last couple of days, if we chant very attentively, then we will not be interested in going to the heavenly planets. We'll be interested in developing our relationship with Krishna and going back to Godhead. Anyway, then you go on. It's quite a long thing, although it's basically addressing the same point. That there are other motives out of which a devotee may go to Vaikuntha or the heavenly planets or get liberation or come back to earth. Well, of course, the devotees, we're practitioners, we're not perfect. And as we've mentioned, old habits die hard. And we're conditioned for many lifetimes. It does take some time to work our way through those things and actually rid ourselves of them. So therefore, naturally, particularly in the beginning, when new devotees are chanting, other ideas will come into their minds. Yeah. Okay, now here's a sort of, it's a type of question we get often. What to do if my parents don't want me to chant japa and blackmail me with their health? How to maintain a taste for chanting and associating with devotees? Well, if your parents are blackmailing you, that's pretty heavy. I'd suggest moving out and keeping in touch and visiting them like that. That's what I'd suggest. Even if they don't want you to chant and they're sort of being negative to you about your chanting, it's a good sign. Time to leave home. You're a big boy now, you're a big girl now. Time to leave home and get yourself together to look after yourself in Krishna consciousness. But how to maintain a taste for chanting if you're associating with non-devotees? Well, associate with devotees also. Make a point of getting lots of good association. Plus, move out. And maybe get a different job if you just get in, if you can't avoid the whole social scene at work. Can we say that the result of Namaparad is the developing of Anathes in a devotee? In other words, if a devotee did not achieve pure chanting without offenses, his chanting could strengthen unnecessary material desires in his heart. I hope you followed that. It's slightly... Anyway, it's okay. The result of chanting Namaparad is the development of Anathes. Well, there's truth, that's true. But if you're trying, even though you're being offensive sometimes, because you're very new and you're spiritually weak and your mind just gets the better of you sometimes. Have you ever heard of that happening to you? But if you keep trying, even though you're in the offensive stage, but because you're trying, the offenses will lessen. It's only if you're chanting with offenses and you really sort of indulge in the offenses that they'll produce real Anathes. Yeah. And what strengthens unnecessary material desires in your heart is not the chanting as such. It's the offenses. Yeah. It's the offenses. It's not the chanting which strengthens the material desires. It's the offenses. So you've probably heard me tell you before, one time I was in a darshan. Srila Prabhupada was giving darshan in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and a devotee asked a question about how do we overcome the 10 offenses if we perform them? What can be done to sort of offset the 10 offenses? And Prabhupada looked at that devotee. He just looked at him. He really looked at the devotee. He looked at the devotee. And Prabhupada said, you are asking this question because you want to offend. You want to offend and just do something to just get free like that. But Prabhupada said, you must stop offending. Prabhupada said, no more offenses. So we should work on that. Otherwise, if you don't watch out, your offenses will take you out the door. And if not out the door, at least they'll take you to a place where you're not happy. And who wants to be unhappy? Is the stage of Bhava always accompanied by bodily symptoms of ecstasy? No. In fact, in Nectar of Devotion, in the 18th chapter, right at the beginning of the 18th chapter, you can look it up, Srila Prabhupada lists out 9 symptoms of Bhava, ecstasy, like the beginnings of actual love for Krishna. And none of them are emotional at all. The first one is not wasting any time. That's not very emotional, is it? It's very down to earth and practical. Another one is perseverance. You keep going in your Krishna consciousness, even though challenges, obstacles may be there. Attached to chanting the holy names. So you can have a look. We're not going to go through all of them. You can have a look. But these are the first symptoms of Bhava. the first symptoms of bhava, and they don't involve necessarily any sort of emotional expressions. Why is it that a devotee who has fully developed Krishna consciousness can become immersed in oblivion of Krishna? Well, I read that. I couldn't quite follow the idea. Oblivion. I may have got it wrong, but it could be taken that someone who's been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time, they become immersed in impersonalism. They become attached to impersonalism. That it's all one. Everyone, everything is God. This is impersonalism. So if the person has been chanting with offenses and has been offending devotees and the guru even, then a tendency towards impersonalism often arises. In the Antya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a story of a devotee named Ramachandra Puri. And he was a devotee. He was a sannyasi. But he was offensive to devotees, always trying to find fault. What's wrong with you? And he became not exactly like a full-on impersonalist, but he became very heavily impersonally tinged. All right, so here we go, devotees. That was Instagram, now Facebook. Can a person go back to Godhead without going through the stages of Bhava and Prema? Well, it is not impossible. Even on the level of Nishtha, there's a distinct possibility. The devotee may be able to remember Krishna at the time of death, and leading up to death, the devotee may be fixed in remembering Krishna. This is the main thing, as Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita. Whoever remembers me at the time of death attains to my nature, means goes to the spiritual world. But if during the course of your life you develop up to the stage of Bhava and what to speak of Prema, then you are going back to Godhead. In fact, you will already be back at Godhead while still living in this body. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay. Now, we are talking about the offensive stage of chanting, which means being very inattentive, the mind's just going off in this way and that. So the devotee then, in Bhagavad Gita 6:35, Krishna says the mind can be controlled by suitable practice and detachment, he says, actually. So the question is, what is this suitable practice? Well, it's a very simple thing in principle. The simple practice is following the process of sadhana bhakti as given by Srila Prabhupada. That's it, in a nutshell. That really is it. Chanting our rounds, well, getting up early, chanting our rounds, following the regulative principles, doing service to whatever degree is practical for you, and associating with devotees, reading the books. These are all different parts of that suitable practice. Can we have more taste and more feelings chanting the Maha Mantra when singing in Kirtan rather than in japa meditation? Well, yes, of course. In fact, it's generally very much like that. Because of the musical environment in Kirtan, and, the group, it's very much a group effort all at one time. It is generally giving more taste and more blissful than chanting japa. So you might think, and some people do think, why chant japa? Why don't we just do kirtan? We'll do kirtan few hours a day instead of japa. But no, we need that personal practice of focusing the mind. And this is the chanting of japa. Prabhupada once was approached by one boy who didn't want to chant japa, but was happy serving in the kitchen. And it's a bit of a long story, actually. And Prabhupada was saying, well, no, you must chant your rounds. Then you can go into the kitchen, no problem. But chant your rounds, then go into the kitchen. It's fine. But the devotee was saying, no, I don't want to chant. I just want to go into the kitchen. In the end, Prabhupada said that you must chant your rounds. And the boy said, why must I chant my rounds? And Prabhupada said, you must chant your rounds because the Supreme Personality of Godhead wants you to chant your rounds. Prabhupada, at his best, which he was often. Okay. So now we mentioned Anatha Nivritti yesterday, that stage. It's the fourth stage. How do we recognize if we're in that stage? Well, you'll recognize because many anathas will start coming up in front of you. And you may even be surprised, wow, where did that come from? Well, the short answer is it came from deeper inside your heart. You haven't really reached so deep into your heart before, but the chanting takes you deep, and therefore some things start coming out. But Anatha Nivritti means that you can deal with them. You start becoming able to deal with them. In the earlier stages, things may come out, things may already be out, like the attraction to illicit sex life, one devotee mentioned, etc. You may already be face to face with these challenges. But in the earlier stages, you won't be able to deal with them very much. To some degree. But on the level of Anatha Nivritti, you begin to become established and start to become free from anathas step by step. So that's how you can recognize the stage. When preaching or trying to cultivate a person, what criteria can we use to understand whether the person is in those four categories we mentioned, Krishna mentions, 17:15 Bhagavad Gita, the ignorant fools, the heavy materialists, the materialistic intellectuals, and the atheists. Well, just start speaking to them. Just start speaking to them and see how they react. And if they react, in one of those ways, then, yeah. Well, it depends how strong. If they're just sort of, half-hearted, a half-hearted materialistic intellectual, have a go. See what you can do. But if they're staunch atheists or something like that, get away. But if you can, give them prasad. Yeah. How do you feel the sweetness of the holy name? You chant attentively. There are 3 rules in chanting. It is said sometimes. 3 rules. Maybe, I don't know if I mentioned them to you before. First rule is, try to chant attentively. Second rule is, try to chant attentively. And the third rule is, as much as you can, try to chant attentively. And chant the Panchatattva Maha mantras from time to time also. So that's how to feel the sweetness of the holy name. In what manner should I chant so as to encourage and convince my family members also to chant the holy name? Well, you should chant in such a way that they see that you are very happy doing this. If they chant and you're beating your mind, you're obviously struggling. Oh, Krishna. And you finish your rounds and it's like, oh my God, I'm finished, I'm so happy. Well, don't expect to influence them to want to chant. But if they see you're happy chanting, but not just chanting, if they see you're happy being involved in Krishna consciousness, they'll definitely think, oh, what's going on here? And if they become exposed to that sufficiently, they'll give it a try. There's a story from somewhere, like maybe Croatia, Slovenia, or somewhere in that part of the world. Some years ago, the son in a family became a devotee and was chanting at home. And the father, whenever he'd see the son chanting, he'd say, oh, what are you doing? Moan and groan. So the boy would chant in his room. But still, sometimes the father would come in and, oh, what are you doing? But then the boy noticed after some, I don't know how long even, but some time, the father stopped complaining. But not more than that. He stopped complaining. He kind of tolerated it. Then one day, the devotee who was working came home from work early, unexpectedly. And he walked in, and his father was sitting there chanting japa. And the devotee said, why didn't you tell me you're doing this? And the father said, I was just too embarrassed because of how I treated you before. Does surrender to the holy name come as a result of perseverance and mercy? Or is it something that we have to make a conscious effort or decision or endeavor to achieve? Well, you've answered your question. It comes as a result of perseverance and mercy. 2 things. Not one thing. It's not just work hard at it, and that's all. And it's not just sit down and wait until the mercy just descends on you. It's perseverance and mercy. Yeah. And perseverance means making a conscious effort. When I'm chanting, I keep pictures and I have a clip of Gopal on my japa bag that I look at. When I find my mind wandering, is it okay to do this? To look at pictures of Krishna while chanting. It's very good to do that. Prabhupada, if you go through his letters, which is quite a big thing to go through, you'll see there's one letter of Prabhupada saying that I want our pujaris to finish dressing the deities as quickly as possible and then open the curtains so the devotees can chant in front of the deities. It means looking at the deities while they're chanting. So, yeah, it's okay. Some devotees have the Maha mantra, they look at it sometimes, written out. Some have pictures. It's okay, it's nice. Aha. Can old habits or anxieties of the mind return after passing the level of anatha-nivritti? Or is such a devotee already protected from falling and nonsense? You know, the thing is, if you make the decision that I want to, say meditate on material life, then whatever level you're on, if you get into that enough, you'll fall. And not just anatha-nivritti, not just say nishta, which is beyond anatha-nivritti. Bharat Maharaj fell from the level of bhava because he allowed his mind to become attached to the baby deer. So, it's a very personal thing. It's not mechanical. And the point is, if you really make a decision, you want to do this, some nonsense, and you persevere with that, eventually you'll fall. What if the motive for joining Krishna consciousness was not pure? One just wanted a pleasant and clean society and nice culture, etc. Is it possible to change this motive? Yes, of course. Yes, of course. You just keep chanting. You just keep chanting, and your motive attentively, and your motives will become purified. Just like Dhruva Maharaj, he wanted a huge kingdom. Narada Muni gave him a process which included chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, wanting the kingdom, Dhruva Maharaj did all those yoga practices that Narada gave him and chanted the mantra. But in the end, the Lord appeared to him and said, okay, you want a kingdom? And Dhruva's heart was so pure, he said, no, I don't now, I just want you. Now I've got you, forget the kingdom, I don't need it. How not to make the chanting of the holy name simply a habit, a daily duty, but see it as a real relationship with Krishna. Yeah. There's so many things we could say about that, but one is that when you begin chanting, and maybe between rounds, or from time to time here and there while you're chanting, you can read some verses and some statements from Shastra and from Prabhupada, glorifying and really encouraging the chanting. And that'll remind you, because we keep forgetting. We need to keep reminding to offset the process of keeping forgetting which is going on in the material world. What is the reason for our disease of hating Krishna? Well, the thing is, in the spiritual world, we became envious of Krishna. Why is he getting all the attention? Why can't I at least get a little? Which then develops, and then very quickly, one is then thrown into the material world. So it's because we became envious of Krishna. We wanted to be honored like he's honored. We wanted to enjoy like he's enjoying. If someone doesn't want to accept Krishna consciousness and is following a different path, should we still preach to them the glories of the holy name and our philosophy? Or is it better to give the holy name only to someone who wants it? No, well, preaching means you're trying to influence people who at this point are into something else. It may be a different spiritual path. It may just be enjoying in material life. I am into rock and roll music or something like that. I am into the opposite sex. These are the people we're preaching to. So whatever the particular interest they have is, we should try to preach to them, unless they're just, in those really nonsense categories. We should try to preach to them. And you'll be surprised. If you try your best, Krishna will help, and you'll be able to influence some people to become Krishna conscious. You'll be surprised who you'll be able to interest. If I don't feel connected with Krishna during chanting, but I do it as a service to the spiritual master, does this healing process work? Well, yes, it can. It should work. But, you may not feel so much of a connection, but still you should chant and try to chant attentively. How many times have I talked about chanting attentively? And then you'll start feeling connected with Krishna and Radharani and Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya and Prabhupada and all the devotees. Yeah. Your heart, your closed heart will open up. Why can't devotees eradicate wrong desire? What now? Oh, okay. Well, why do devotees still have wrong desires and then leave Krishna consciousness after many years of practice? Well, a simple answer to that is because they commit offenses. Yeah. Offenses is such a dangerous thing. We really got to try to avoid offenses. And if we really do our best to avoid offenses, then rather than sort of become distracted at any point, but we'll just simply become more and more enthusiastic. So here we go. Last question, devotees. What is more important? Prasadam, serving devotees, or serving Krishna? Without prasadam, we starve. Without Krishna, there isn't prasadam. Interesting question. Really speaking, if you read Prabhupada's books and if you listen to Prabhupada, you'll see that Prabhupada stresses serving Krishna. Serving devotees sort of comes under the heading of serving Krishna. It's a kind of aspect, you could say, of service to Krishna. And prasadam, of course, to take prasadam is service to Krishna. Yeah. But Prabhupada always encouraged, chant Hare Krishna, serve Krishna, be a devotee of Krishna, practice Krishna consciousness. So Krishna is in the foreground. On a more advanced level, it may be that serving devotees sort of appears to become more important. But really speaking, it's just another aspect of serving Krishna. Because you remember the definition we gave right at the beginning? We read the verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadya Navritam, Anukulyena Krishna Nu. Yeah. Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama. So Krishna, what is pure devotional service? Well, it must be for Krishna. We emphasize that point. Or his expansions, or his devotees. And it often happens, that because the devotees are right in front of our eyes every day and all day, and we have personal relationships and discussions back and forth. It's a whole social environment in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, serving devotees may sort of acquire a special prominence in the overall picture of devotional service. But prasadam is also fine. That's nice. You must if you don't take prasadam, there's something seriously wrong with you. If you want to be a devotee and you don't take prasadam, you're a bit mad, I think. Okay, we got through our questions by the grace of the Lord. Thank you very much. There were many nice questions there. I can see you're thinking about these things. And that's what we want. We want to see you think and not just be sort of like passive. But, some interaction, relationship, back and forth is an important part of education, of any sort of education. And what we're doing is spiritual education. So, okay, we will close here.